Did you know that Israel may have more vegetarians per capita than any other country in the world? Why do you think that is? There's one man, a Jewish man, who shakes Israel up every time he arrives. He's been banned from Canada, arrested and beaten. He has the most watched YouTube video in Israel. He's calling for a violent resistance to save animals from the cruelty of man. Listen to what this guy has to say.
Right now, at this very moment, on American highways, there are no less than 5,000 concentration camp trucks. Trucks that we've constructed. Inside these trucks, there are living, terrified, innocent beings. Cows and pigs and chickens. These trucks are being driven to concentration camp slaughterhouses that we've carefully constructed all across America. The animals are so frightened, they won't even get off the truck. They're not stupid. They know what's next. So people go on the trucks with electric prods and force them to walk down the chutes to their own death. Or if the animals are small enough to manhandle like chickens, we'll just grab them off the trucks and toss them inside. Inside, these innocent living beings are hanged upside down, fully conscious. In other words, they go in alive against their will and come out chopped up into hundreds of pieces. But you know what's more insane than that? Meat eaters. Walking around like their lifestyle isn't causing any harm. Like it's normal and natural to be consuming violence and death.
So that's Gary Yourofsky. Like you said, Jeremy, he is a radical animal rights activist. And he doesn't only advocate the merits of veganism, but the absolute evil of meat eaters.
And now, live from Jerusalem, you're listening to Israel-Inspired Radio. Here are your hosts, Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
So, Jeremy, it is good to be here. It's good to be here with you. I got to admit that this little period of time we have here together is increasingly becoming the highlight of my week.
Absolutely.
It really is. And I got to tell you just what happened to me today. Today was one of those days. I was walking out of the house. My iPhone falls down and shatters. Now, my initial feeling was devastation. Like, the screen totally shatters. It's not working. It's dead.
Devastation.
Devastation. Like, I'm now a blind child wandering in the desert. Like, what can I do? I don't know I don't have numbers. I don't have a way. And then I became happy because I realized, oh my God, I'm so addicted to this thing. It was almost an immediate happiness. Like, thank you for opening my eyes to how much of an idol this little machine is for me. I'm not going to let this bother me. And I'm actually going to try to make it a point in my life soon that I shut that baby off for a while because it starts consuming, you know?
Absolutely.
But that's part of what it is. I'm trying to make my life right now, this world, a better place. And that's a Jewish quality. And that's what we were talking about with Gary Yourofsky. Because he's a very controversial guy. But I got to admit, there's a part of me that really loves this guy.
Loves him.
Loves him. Even though I disagree with fundamentally with what he is saying, there's an element of him that is so Jewish and makes me so proud. But let me ask you, what do you think of this guy, Jeremy?
Well, first, I think it's interesting that he's calling in the name of kindness and compassion to a violent resistance against humans in the name of kindness, meaning the whole thing is just radical to me.
What does that mean, a violent resistance against humans?
He wants to physically stop, hurt. He sees someone with a leather jacket, he punches them in the face and gets arrested because he is violently trying to stop humans from killing animals.
Okay.
But he's doing it because he loves the animals.
Just for the sake of consistency, that punching a guy with a leather jacket, that's something you've encountered? Because I've heard about some things he's done. Are you sure he's done that?
Here's a direct quote from Gary Yourofsky. If people continually deny animals their inherent right to be free, radical tactics are necessary and justified. physically preventing an abuser from committing abuse and killing a murderer to stop the murder are noble, vicarious acts of self-defense.
Did he punch someone in the face?
Yes, here in Israel, and he got arrested for it. He has now a police file in the police. He punched like an Israeli reporter.
Why did he pick him? A lot of people wear animal products.
I don't know. Maybe he said something that upset him, but he is a violent, radical animal rights activist.
Because I heard that he went and he cut the fence to a minx farm, where I have to admit, when I heard about that, you don't have to agree with everything someone does, but the way they kill those animals for the minx, and it's just for cosmetic things, it's the worst side of animal killing, and he just cut the fence and let them run. That to me is not punching someone in the face for wearing a leather jacket. That's another story. And I would really want to, confirm that story, because maybe he punched a reporter that was wearing a leather jacket because the reporter was just a terrible person. Doesn't mean it's because he was wearing the jacket. I'm just saying, let's try to keep it as... No?
Keep it as what? It was like headlines in Israel. Also, he's banned from Canada for a reason. He's not banned in Canada because he's releasing minks from farms. He's banned in Canada because he's violent. And he's calling others to join his violent resistance to free animals and prevent humans.
All right, so
physically.
what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, so on one hand, it's remarkable and insane at the same time. I don't know how else to say it. On one hand, there is a deep, deep Jewish belief that there is a sanctity to life. That's a core value that was revealed to us by God. Life isn't just human life. Life is also animal life and tree life and vegetable life and the environment. All of that is life, and there is a sanctity to life. And so he's coming from a place that's really very beautiful, that he's recognizing the sanctity of life of the animals. Meaning, here's an example. Jewish thought, traditional, this isn't New Age Jeremy Gimpel stuff. Here is Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik in The Emergence of Ethical Man. This is what he says, direct quote, "There is a distinct reluctance, almost an unwillingness on the part of the Torah to grant man the privilege to consume meat. Man, as an animal eater, is looked at askance by the Torah. There are definitive vegetarian tendencies in the Tanakh. He believes that in an ideal Jewish world, we should all be vegetarians. That's where the Tanakh and the Torah, according to Rav Soloveitchik, are pointing us and directing us. But because man hasn't arrived there yet, oh well, he's eating meat now. But ideally, we should not be eating meat, black on white. So Gary Yourofsky is tapping into something very Jewish here. And at the same time, because he's coming from such a different place, he throws the whole thing loose, and now he's attacking man.
Okay. So he's attacking man. What part of that is bothering you the most?
I mean, to me, it seems like attacking man and eating animals, it's fascinating. I mean, Rav Kook also writes about it. Rav Kook talks about that one day, he almost speaks of it as a prophecy, that the world will become vegetarian. And it's an essay called Chazonat Tzimchonut. He wrote it 110 years ago, literally almost to the day. And he writes about how every mitzvah in the Torah is there teaching us how to grow in a sensitivity to life, to animals in particular. It says when you do shechita and you cut the animal's throat and blood spills out of the animal, you're supposed to cover up the blood. That's a mitzvah in the Torah called kisui hadam, the covering of blood. Rav Kook says the reason we do that is to constantly remind us that we should be embarrassed that we spilt blood of a living creature. And then he talks about shatnez, where the woving of wool and linen. Why is there that mitzvah? Meaning you're not allowed to wear clothing that's also of wool and also of linen. That had perplexed me for years. And Rav Kook says the reason is the Torah is teaching us a value that what comes from an animal and what comes from a plant, wool and linen, are different. And they're inherently different, and you should never consider them or treat them as the same. What you took from the animal doesn't belong to you. It really belongs to the animal. And what's taken from a tree is a totally different level, meaning the Torah is teaching us that there are levels of sensitivity, and we need to be more kind to the creatures.
So you're a vegan.
Well, that's really where it all boils down to. I think that the last 3 months have absolutely consumed me because I no longer eat any animal products or meat. And I know I've been advised not to tell people that. People have told me, Jeremy, I think it's more strategic if you just tell them you're a vegetarian, because once you say you're a vegan, you sound like such a different creature that you almost lose credibility in the eyes of people.
It's so funny that you're saying that.
That's the advice that I've been given.
To me, I feel like I'm losing credibility by not being one. Meaning only perhaps the preparation for this show, and maybe it's just the the information that I'm consuming. But to me, it's becoming increasingly clear that for a series of reasons that I'll explain later, that I actually think it's a good thing, at least for me. But I'm not doing it. Partially because I think I'm just intellectually dishonest, but I think a better part of me is I'm easing into it, because sometimes when you see an absolute truth and it's a radical shift from the way you are now and you go straight to it, it's almost self-sabotage. If you
totally understand that.
If you can bring
ease
it
your
down
way into
to
it. Totally.
And it's only when you do that do you realize you can eat it at another time later. You push it off more and more and more because it's not it's not forbidden forever.
What's most important, though, is what is the ideal way to live? That's really the question. Now, at least we know what we're striving for. We know what we're working towards. Right now, most people think that, eating animals, that's what I do because that's what I do. How else could I celebrate Shabbat? Ein simcha ela bebasar v'yain. People say that sentence all the time.
There's no happiness other than...
there's no happiness other than when you eat meat and wine. And therefore, how could you not eat meat? I mean, it's like a part of Jewish culture, Jewish law. That text from the Gemara is totally taken out of place. And meaning within Jewish thought, there's no question that we are meant to be sensitive to life. And if we can just recognize that that's the ideal, then if we make it there today or tomorrow, in a year or in 20 years, or our kids, we will at least be teaching our kids that, you know what, in a Jewish world, it's best to be vegetarian. That's what we're really striving for. We're going to eat a little bit less meat. We're going to have one day a week we don't eat meat at all. Something like that to start gaining the process and easing their way into it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you the honest truth is I'm still on the journey regarding this. I'm far from arriving at what is the absolute truth for me. But this is what I would throw at you, Jeremy, that the compassion moral argument for veganism is such that if people were actually treating animals correctly with the correct respect, then there's an argument to make that vegetarianism would be okay, because it's so terrible the way they treat the animals that even byproducts like milk and eggs are tainted with cruelty.
Indeed.
But if it wasn't that way, then really there's an argument to make that not only is vegetarianism good, but possibly that eating meat in the right way at the right time is good. What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. I think that, like Rav Kook said, ultimately, we're just not going to want to take any life from this world. In the ultimate reality. Meaning, if I was hungry and I had to eat meat, so yes, I will go find an animal, kill it, and eat it to survive. But if I don't have to take life from this world, then why?
Well, I'll tell you why.
But right now, I would think there's arguments to say why yes, totally. Right now, though, in the reality of this world, the way that factory farming and the Industrial Revolution, what's happened in the world today, in my mind, it is simply not kosher to eat.
Right. So I think we need to get into the details of what we're talking about that happens there in a little bit, because we're just alluding to it. We're not saying it. But let me just put that aside for a second. Let me ask you this, Jeremy.
Okay.
If you were at a free farm where goats are just walking and being free and frolicking and eating, and then it was killed in a respectful way of shechita, would you still say there's no reason in this world to be eating meat? Or is it only because of the way non-organic, free-range animals are being treated? But if they were being treated well, you would reassess and possibly you would eat meat. Because if you're saying your argument is on a morality level, then in theory, if it's consistent with Jewish thought, there's an argument to say you would eat meat if it was raised on a...
It's a really good question. I really don't know the answer to that right now. Because right now, my calling emotionally is to stop factory farming. I want to say no to your answer. I would be like, no, I'm just not eating anything that is that is alive. I'm just not doing it. I will eat vegetarian because that's my choice. That's what I want to do in the world. I don't want to be taking any life right now. Now, it could be that really in an ideal world, I could imagine in some wild way that eating a meat in some form of sacrifice or some sort of special occasion, something that really elevates the entire meal almost spiritually, then I would say, like, perhaps then it would justify the taking of an animal life. But right now, I just don't see it. It's not in my life. I'm not necessarily saying that's what everyone has to do. And I find most vegan, vegetarian people annoying. I used to be them, meaning I used to be the person that would be like, oh, gosh, I don't want to hear this. You guys are so annoying. I used to be that person that didn't want to talk to them because they were annoying. And I don't want to be that person. But here's the reality. Like right now, I just can't imagine doing it.
So for me, when you're saying right now, when I'm thinking about, I think it would be the right thing for me, Ari Abramowitz. I'm not saying this is a universal condition, but for me to be a vegan right now. And I'll tell you, one of the main reasons why is because I feel like I don't deserve meat. I mean, why did Moshe Rabbeinu want to enter the land of Israel? Our sages say that he wanted to eat the fruit of the land. Why? Because when your body eats, when you consume something, it becomes your physical body. Every 7 years, our body's totally regenerating. His physical body becomes the land of Israel. When we eat meat, it's a tremendous responsibility, meaning that the only thing that would really justify me today eating meat is if I was fully human, meaning with the dignity of humanity, because then I'm actually elevating this meat to a higher spiritual level. But right now, I don't feel like I'm fully human. Why? Because I eat sometimes things that is not healthy for me just because it looks good. That's sort of an animalistic quality. A human has the spiritual control over the physical. It's so physical is subjugated to the spiritual.
Well, so first of all, I totally agree with you. And not only do I agree with you, if I were to continue what Rav Soloveitchik said, he says exactly what you said. He says, man, like animal, was created originally to live solely upon vegetables and fruits. Somehow, the reason is irrelevant to our present inquiry. Nature deteriorated. The Torah states unequivocally that all flesh became wicked. At some point, humanity was sensitive enough spiritually to literally live. We were ultimately designed and created in order to live on fruits and vegetables. Somehow along human progress, quote unquote, civilization, whatever may have happened, at one point our physical took over our spiritual, and we started what? Invading into territory that wasn't originally ours. And that's what he says Hamas is in the Torah. When it says that there was Hamas mal'eh ha'aretz after Noach, when meat then became allowed, humanity started crossing its boundaries and robbing people, humans, but also robbing animals of what wasn't originally really theirs. And they said that they started taking animal lives. And at that point, God said, all right, start over, reboot. But at that point, humanity had already reached a place where they were already eating animals. Something had changed. And now I believe our goal is for us to rewire humanity's brains again. And that would actually be one step closer to what could potentially be a new era for mankind. Because as we act, we become. And if people physically now refrain from eating meat, they will eventually spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, they will evolve into people that have now a respect for life, a new respect for life. And if I wouldn't hurt an animal, how could I possibly hurt a human? And then potentially it's a step towards humanity living at more peace with each other, if that's really the ultimate goal that we're trying to reach.
It's a very sort of nuanced subject, because part of what I was planning on talking about a little bit later is the dangerous side of the motivation for veganism. Meaning to me, it's all about the motivations. Veganism could be, it's a good thing, but if it's for the bad motivations, it's a bad thing. Because what does, the Rav Dessler say? That the greatest service of God lies in the refinement of motivation. So what's one's motivation? The motivations I'm hearing from you, those are good motivations. And, you were just talking about veganism by choice.
Right.
That the higher human level to rewire man's brains to where now, before we were born as vegans, I was actually reading that the pre-flood, man was above the food chain. Post-flood, he became a part of the food chain.
Interesting.
We had to dip down. We weren't masters over it anymore because there was evil infused within us. So it's almost like just a food reflection of the rest of the messianic consciousness and development we've been talking about all these years.
Right.
we're talking about liberating ourselves from a certain something. So what do you think? Go ahead.
I think it's fascinating what you're saying. I mean, I have what I believe to be an absolute chiddush. I mean, when this idea came to me, I felt like, wow, thank you for such a beautiful idea. Because what is the most famous messianic prophecy that you see everywhere around the world? I would say the lion will lay with the lamb. There are pictures of it. You see it everywhere. It's like one of those swords into plowshares prophecies of the most famous prophecies in the world. Jews know it. Non-Jews know it. It's universally recognized as a messianic prophecy in the Bible. Now imagine what that means. The lion laying with the lamb means that a lion will no longer kill another life in order to eat its food. But imagine if it's not necessarily speaking about a lion, but it's sort of an analogy to the way man will be. That man will be able to lay with its lamb as well and not eat it and take life from any other creature again. And what people usually say about the lion lay with the lamb is that, yes, it will be a totally new spiritual reality on earth. But truly, if humanity stops taking life from other living creatures, it would be a totally new spiritual reality on earth. It would be a new level of consciousness. And I think that is what that prophecy is alluding to. It's not necessarily about the animals themselves, but rather about humanity coming to a higher sensitivity of living, where we will not kill in order to eat.
So why then do we have all of the laws of tsar ba'alei chayim, of harming animals, of hurting animals? Why doesn't it just say, do not do that? That is the ideal, is not to do that. Why?
Right. Well, for example, tsar ba'alei chayim is a great example of saying you're not allowed to inflict pain onto an animal for no reason. You're not allowed to. And so they're already within the Torah law are rules and regulations on how you have to treat another living creature. You're not allowed to kill them.
Take a moment to enumerate a few of those
Absolutely.
laws? Okay, so it talks about an animal's suffering. It says if an animal depends on you for sustenance, it's forbidden to eat anything until feeding the animal first. That's Jewish law. We're commanded to grant our animals a day of rest on Shabbat. Right, Jeremy? To actually give them a Shabbat. And it's another fascinating one is that it's forbidden to use two different species to pull the same plow, since it's unfair to the weaker animal. Meaning it's actually feeling compassion for these animals. That's what Yourofsky was talking about. He was talking about compassion and peace in the world. And all of these laws are a reflection of that. It's a mitzvah to send away the mother bird before taking her young. You can't kill a calf, a cow and a calf, her calf on the same day. There's the laws of ritual slaughter. Very intricate, very detailed.
Well, so here's the real question. I think this is what people, live with, and this is what the real hovering question over Judaism is really about, is why didn't God just say, don't eat it? Meaning, it's there. There are laws on how to slaughter it. There are laws on how to eat it, what you are allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat. Meaning God has said, listen, I don't want you to eat pigs, but you can eat cows. Why didn't God then just say, if what we're saying is true, and it's the highest morals, and it's the highest ethics, and it's what the world should do in sensitivity of life, why didn't it say it in the Torah?
That's what I've been asking you.
Well, so my answer is that the Torah is revealed in a certain time and in all times. At the time when humanity had its first true revelation of Jewish consciousness, then at that time, humanity was just going to eat meat. There was no way around it. It was a part of life. And so within that framework, they said, here, this is what you're allowed to do. Some people say, in general, that's what sacrifice was. People say that the Rambam says that sacrifice wasn't an ideal form of worship, but the Jews were so immersed in idolatrous sacrifices that now God just provided them an additional sacrificial system that they can now do for God. Meaning, Sacrifice, though, is not the ideal, even though it's in the Torah. An ideal worship would be through meditation, through prayer, through service, acts of kindness. Sacrificial was because at that time they were so connected to that sacrificial system of idolatry that they had to give them an expression of what that would be today. In the same way, at the time that the Torah has been revealed to us until this very day, right now humanity is at the level that we're so immersed in eating meat that here, this is how we can eat meat. But there are all these laws guiding us away from it, getting us towards a life where we're more sensitive to life, that ultimately we would know that Adam and Eve, until Noah, ideal humanity, even though we're not there yet, is to not eat meat. And I think the challenge of this generation is to say, if that's really the ideal, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to live the ideal life now. I'm not going to wait for the Messiah to come. I'm going to move to Israel and make it happen. If I believe that eating a better life, eating healthier, helping the environment, doing what I have to do to be the best person that I can be, then that's what I'm going to do already today. Could Gary Yourofsky possibly be pushing humanity forward? I don't know.
Well, I think in a lot of ways he is. I mean, the Rambam Maimonides, he says that when you're at one extreme and you need to go into the golden mean, you have to temporarily go to the opposite extreme to then recalibrate. And I think he serves that function. By sometimes exposing a truth, you need to make it ludicrous, absurd, extreme, but a certain underlying truth is conveyed. When I saw his video, I didn't agree with what he said, but I was inspired about the concept of veganism as a happy medium to the extreme that he was presenting.
He was compelling.
He was very compelling, very compelling. And I'll tell you, I like the guy, but at the same time, he's dangerous. And it's critical to be aware of that. First of all, why am I envious of him? Because he sees a truth and he's living the truth. He sees so clearly what his calling of his generation is, and he needs to do it. For us, I feel like sometimes it's not always as clear. It's not like getting the British out of Palestine. You know, it's like some sort of difficult to put our finger what that beauty is, what that calling is for us. It's more nuanced and not as clear as it is for him.
Right. I also feel like our mission is so internal that as we're going along our mission, it takes constant reflection on our inner growth and our inner development and our relationship with our Creator and our relationship with our family. And we're growing on this internal, it's constantly changing.
Exactly. It's in flux, it's individual, it's nuanced, and for him it's very simple and very clear. And so there's a little envy there, but also I love the fact that what is so quintessentially Jewish about him is, number one, his desire to tikkun olam. In his mind, he's fixing the world, and he's being so unreasonable about it. And that unreasonableness, I think, is a beautiful Jewish quality, and if applied right and correctly, it's why I think Hashem fell in love with us and why we love Hashem. It's two sides. I was just meeting this morning with this very influential guy from Taiwan. We were speculating as to why God chose the Jewish people with us being so rebellious, and I think that is one part of it, is that he chose us because we're so unreasonable and stiff-necked, and that Gary Yourofsky is an example of that. His underlying essence and motivation is a beautiful one.
Well, here's what I think. Think how many people are protesting the death of the people in Africa, or how many people protested the Holocaust. Really, it's sad, but not that many. I mean, there were a few Jews that were fighting for Soviet Jewry because they cared for Jewish freedom and Jewish life. What I love about Gary Yourofsky is that he really cares about life to the point where he's ready to protest. He's ready to act. And although he has a lot of baggage, on that point, I think we all have what to learn from him.
Right, and I'll tell you, I think that's the motivation that I'm talking about. But in the world of truth, it's also very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because equating a beef slaughterhouse to Auschwitz, it leads to exactly the reverse. Rabbi Albo from the 14th century, he actually says this. He says, this danger started with Cain and Abel. The Cain brought grain, and Abel brought an animal to sacrifice. But Cain, from his perspective, thought that humans and animals were equals, and we had no right to kill an animal. And when he saw his brother killing an animal, he said, well, now I have a right to kill my brother. That's the root of that type of thinking, which taken to an extreme is the Nazis. That at the same time when they were implementing these horrific human experiments in Auschwitz, the same time they were passing legislation for animal rights. I mean, that is just an extreme, gross example of where this type of thinking could lead, of equating the two. But listen, I'm not trying to diminish the issue, because the beauty of animals is within that distinction. Because while humans are at a higher level, it's because we have free will and the ability to create. Whereas animals are simply a bundle of instincts. That there's a type of angel, it says Ofanim, the Ofanim v'chayot HaKodesh, the sacred or sanctified animals, but it's a type of angel is an animal, because in heaven, an angel does not have free will. They're just a beautiful manifestation of God. And that's the reflection of those angels in this world are animals. And we have to treat those animals with the same compassion and love that we would for God himself. And that's the type of sensitivity I believe we need to really develop and get in the Baal Shem Tov. He didn't have to wash the blade of his ritual slaughtering knife. It says his tears washed that blade because of the compassion that he felt. And all of our forefathers, Moses and David, they were shepherds because of compassion. And that is the underlying motivation that I think is the holiest and the best for actually being a vegan today. But in my opinion, that's the Israel-inspired perspective on the issue. We should end every show like that. That's the Israel-inspired perspective on the issue.
Folks, this is Jeremy Gimpel and Ari Abramowitz. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to make a comment or a rating on iTunes, it is in your merit that we are the #1 show. Thank you so much.